Hello, everyone, and welcome to Neurocracy. Today, we're joined by Dr. Jamie Zeitzer, a neuroscientist at Stanford who studies how body clocks and light influence our sleep. His work is focused on why teenagers stay up late, how school schedules affect mental health, and even new ways, like timed light flashes and teen-friendly videos, can help us get the rest that we need. Dr. Zeitzer, thank you for joining me today.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Sanjay.
So, my first question for you is, how did you first get involved in circadian biology?
Well, I wish I could say that it was a thoughtful decision, but it was more accidental.
Okay.
Honestly, I hadn't heard about it until I was in graduate school, and then Chuck Weitz, who is a professor at Harvard, gave this talk, and he was talking about the circadian clock and how the circadian clock was located in the suprachiasmatic nucleus. And I thought it was completely fascinating that an entire behavior could be isolated to a single nucleus in the brain. And I had always been interested at that point in kind of the biological basis of behavior, and this felt like it was a really approachable kind of thing.
Yeah. So could you share a little bit about what you do in circadian research and maybe some of your most interesting projects?
Sure. Um, So I do a lot of things over the
Okay.
years. I've done many different kinds of projects. Um, I've done work in humans, as well as rats, mice, cats, dogs, fish,
Wow.
hamsters, monkeys. Um,
That's funny.
Collaborated with flies, but so lots of different experiments, mainly using these different species, trying to answer different questions.
Yeah.
Um, and I've had the good fortune of being able to kind of be a bit peripatetic and kind of answer different questions that I thought were kind of interesting from a scientific perspective.
Yeah.
Um, but a lot of it has been trying to understand kind of the fundamental basis of the circadian clock and how it contributes to behavior, how we can control the clock, how we can manipulate it, and why is it important? I mean, this clock is present in everything. Pretty much every species that has been studied, including species that live less than 24 hours, have
Wow.
24-hour clocks. So
Oh,
to me,
okay.
there's something completely fundamental about it because evolution doesn't like waste. And so if it wasn't
Right.
useful, we would see lots of organisms that don't have it. So there has to be something super important. So why? And again, we can hand wave, make stuff up, and I think there's some good reasons out there about why we have this clock. But what does it do? Why do we, is it really that important to our health? I mean, if you don't have a clock, if which we can't really do in human, but you could do in a mouse, you take out the clock, they don't die, but
Yeah.
they are definitely less healthy.
Yeah.
So what does it
We
do?
actually, I helped run experiments in Dr. Herzog's lab where we'd put like a wire into like mouse brain and then like lesion the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then I would have to stain it and then check to see how accurate the lesions were to
There
see
you
if we
go.
could
Yeah,
use
you're
the
doing
data.
your Nissl stain, you
Yeah.
measure it.
Or we use
Um,
Crestle Violet, but
Oh, there you go.
yeah,
So yeah,
yeah.
so this is again, you can do this in a mouse and you can see what the consequences are. In a
Right.
human, it's I'm unaware that there might be somebody out there who doesn't have a clock. Um,
Okay. Yeah.
but it would be very strange because basically where it's located in the hypothalamus, unless you intentionally go in to
Yeah.
destroy it, it's pretty deep and it's surrounded
Yeah.
by a bunch of things that if you damage, you die.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
So one of the specific things about your research I want to talk about is teenagers. And
yeah,
I believe you're the father of three teenagers, if I'm not mistaken.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how or really what do you know about teen sleep that is different from maybe adults and why is it significant today? And this is like a broad question, so you can take it however.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, fundamentally, teen sleep is pretty similar to adult sleep.
Right.
It's different from sleep as a child, um, but you know, most teens, depending on how old they are, that they're in various stages of puberty, sleeps can be pretty similar. Um,
Yeah.
the main difference is that, well, that there are a couple of things. One is that there seems to be a change in how you accumulate sleep pressure. So basically, there are two main things that kind of regulate when you sleep. One is the circadian clock, and the other is the sleep pressure. And teens seem to build it up more slowly, and basically that means you can go to sleep later. So if you can
Okay.
compare teens to younger kids, you can go to sleep later as a teen. And then combine this with all sorts of things like, well, you're up late and you can do stuff. And when I honestly, when I first started doing research in teens, I thought, well, the teens were like me when I was a teen, which is not the most well organized human being, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, well, if we just get them organized. And then what you find out is that even if you organize them, and you're like, okay, well, you say you're up late doing social media. Why don't you do social media early? Then they'll do social media early, but then they'll game later. And it's
Right.
like, oh, well, you're gaming later. Why don't you game earlier? Well, then they'll do homework later. So basically, teens like being up late. And I think that it's because that it kind of gives them a time to practice being an adult in the sense that their parents aren't up, or if they're up, they're not hassling them and telling them
Right.
what to do and what not to do. So it's a very precious time for teens. So they stay up late, but school starts early,
Yeah.
so they don't get enough sleep. So I don't think there's anything particularly unique about teen sleep itself, except of course that it's so short, and they're
Yeah.
just not getting enough sleep, and that then leads to all sorts of, I think, negative downstream consequences.
Yeah. So I believe one of your research project is using timed flashes of light to kind of almost shift teen brains into different time zones.
Yeah.
Could you explain a little bit about that? Because I'm very interested to hear about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, again, the idea is that teens go to sleep later, but they have to get up in time for school.
Right.
And so what we thought is, well, why don't we shift their clock? Basically fool their clock into thinking they're in a different time zone. They're living in California, but their brains are in Colorado. So that way at 1 a.m. in brain time, it's only midnight local time. So they go to sleep an hour earlier. So we thought this was a very clever experiment. We can do this by basically giving these bright light flashes while they're sleeping. It doesn't wake them up, but it
Okay.
does kind of fool the brain into thinking that there's an earlier sunrise. So if
Oh,
you normally get up at 7 a.m., we give you these light flashes starting at 6 a.m. So your brain basically thinks, oh, there's light at 6 a.m. That's the time zone I'm in, as
right.
opposed to this light at 7 a.m.
Does this not cause like an accumulation of sleep debt? Like, because you're still technically not getting enough, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Well, what happens is that if you do this, you enable the person to go to sleep earlier. And so again, we
Oh.
thought this was very clever. And frankly, if you did this in a mouse, the mouse would go to sleep an hour earlier. If you do this in a teen, you piss teens off, and they don't get any more sleep.
Oh,
Because what happens is you make them tired earlier, but they
yeah.
don't actually go to sleep earlier. And
Oh,
so oddly enough, teens are not just large versions of mice,
right.
which frankly
Yeah.
I probably should have known, but
Yeah.
live and learn.
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to combine it with a behavioral intervention that actually convinces a teen or tries to convince a teen to
Okay.
try to go to sleep earlier. Now, if I gave you a behavioral intervention to try to convince you to go to sleep earlier and you wanted to go to sleep earlier, you'd go to sleep earlier by about 5 or 10 minutes because it's very difficult to go to sleep earlier than you want to because the circadian clock is telling your brain to stay awake at that time of night. So if you normally go to sleep at 1, at midnight, it's hard to go to sleep because your circadian clock is struggling really hard to keep you awake.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult to move that because of the biology. So the first thing you have to do is you have to get rid of this biological impediment, and that's kind of moving that wake window to an earlier time. Again, it's enabling you. But if you
Okay.
just do that, they don't go to sleep any earlier. They get tired earlier, but they don't act on it. But if you combine it with the behavioral intervention, then you see that they get extra sleep. And in this case, we saw they were getting 45 minutes of extra sleep per night.
Oh, wow. So what's like an example of a behavioral intervention in this case?
So in this case, it's a combination of things. Some of it is basic kind of what you call sleep hygiene, All right, so sleep in a quiet room that's
Yeah.
dark. It's very nice. Other things about, you should get consistent bedtimes and consistent wake times. Again, these are very kind of standard things. Um, but then it gets into things that are more related to motivational interviewing and values-based clarification, which
Yeah.
I'm not a psychologist, so I'm parroting these words.
Okay.
Um, but basically, what you're doing is you are convincing someone to try to go to sleep earlier by finding out what's important to them. So if I say, if I talk to you and say, find out what's important, you're like, well, what's important is academics. Then you basically say, okay, well, here's why getting an hour more sleep is better than studying for that extra hour. You know, if sports are important, then you say, okay, here's why getting an hour more sleep is important for, for your sport performance, your athletic performance. If it's friends, it's like, okay, here's why getting an hour more sleep is going to increase your likelihood of getting a date.
Yeah.
So it's whatever is important to the team, you basically focus on that and say, that is why sleep. Because frankly, if I say, well, you should get more sleep, because in 40 years, there's going to be a 3% reduced chance of you having, a problem with your liver, you're going to be like, okay, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that's neither here nor there.
Yeah. So another thing like kind of related to this, I think, is the like teen friendly like games or characters that you help develop. Like I think that represent different like circadian kind of like a night owl. I forgot the name
Yeah,
exactly, but could you just explain like some of those characters, what inspired them and how they like work?
sure. So,
Yeah.
in order to do this, um, this behavioral intervention. A very talented student of mine, Kate Kaplan, who's trained as a psychologist, came up with all of this. And it's fantastic, but it requires one-on-one interaction.
Okay.
It requires, a trained therapist to sit there with a student every week for an hour
Oh,
for 4 weeks, right?
okay.
So that's great, and it works really well. The problem is that there aren't enough trained therapists out there to do this.
Yeah.
So we thought, well, okay, can we convert this to an online therapy, right? Can we convert
Yeah.
this to a therapy where instead of doing it where it's an hour of hour sit down, and this is a very kind of this is not like lie on the couch and telling me about how your mom messed up your sleep kind of thing. This is
Yeah.
much more functional kind of therapeutic intervention, and so um, the so we converted a lot of this to um, a this kind of we tried to do honestly we tried to do TikTok to get these videos under a minute. We
Oh,
couldn't do that, so
yeah.
mainly around 2 minute videos, 3 minute videos that we basically send every day, every couple of days we send this short video.
Hmm.
And for the video, we basically developed three characters. We have a night owl,
Yeah.
um, that's Otis,
Yeah.
and then we've got Livy the mountain lion, and then we
Rocky.
have our gamer, who
Yeah.
is a oh gosh, I'm blanking.
I
Who's our
think Rocky,
gamer?
right?
Rocky. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Rocky the raccoon is our gamer,
Yeah.
and so these are three archetypes. These are three
Okay.
things that kind of that lots of teens can identify with. So the gamer, he likes gaming. So he comes home, takes a nap, and then games late into the night, right? The mountain
Yeah.
lion is our type A personality.
Hmm.
She's high strung, has lots of homework, does really well in school, studies late, and can't turn her brain off at night.
Okay.
And then Otis the Night Owl, he's just up late. He just likes being awake late. Doesn't really do anything, particular. He
Yeah.
just and so basically we kind of guide you through these three different characters. And again, they are not um, they're not independent of one another. I mean, you can identify with all of them or one of them or two, and basically they're showing you how, to kind of improve your sleep. And so we did this. And we came up with these characters, and we basically converted a lot of what is being taught in these one-on-one sessions into this kind of into this video development. And the idea is that right now we're testing this, and we're in our last year of a 5-year study,
Okay.
testing
Wow.
this out to see if it works.
Yeah.
And if it works, the idea is to make it freely available. Just say, here are these videos, you put in your email, and then the system will send you, these videos, every couple of days for a few weeks to help you, improve your sleep.
Okay. Kind of reminds me of like Duo and like Duolingo a little bit, you know?
Yes. I have to say, we struggled because in this kind of therapy, you need to feel like you identify with the
Right.
character. Um, and so we struggled with like, okay, so should you have a boy or a girl,
Yeah.
or should, what race should it be?
Right.
What skin color? I mean, and there were so many permutations, and we didn't want to have someone, you know, not want to identify because they didn't identify physically with the character. So that's why we actually move to animals and
Okay,
kind of
I
this
see.
kind of archetype
That's
to try to say anyone can identify. So it's a little more childish than if it were people that you would
right.
be seeing in there. Um, but that was kind of the trade-off that we had.
Yeah, I do think that pe a lot of people do like identify with, like the Duolingo animal at least. I think they kind of like did a great job like branding it and keeping it kind of like in a funny like way, but it's still in a way that like gets people like onto the app. And
Right.
I think you guys also did like the three like archetypes that you mentioned, like all of them seem to capture like different people, but
Mhm.
like I feel like that captures a wide breadth. Did you guys like narrow it down from more, or how did that like work out, I guess?
Yeah, so this was, I mean, yeah, there were many, many, many discussions
Right. Yeah.
about because again, if you have them too narrow
Right. Yeah,
or too
that's
many,
no issue.
yeah,
Yeah.
so three seem to capture
Yeah.
quite a bit of the variance of what we see in individuals and kind of how they view themselves. Um,
Yeah.
I have to say, the feedback that we've gotten, most people really like Rocky.
Okay.
They identify
Yeah.
heavily with the
Yeah.
gamer.
Yeah. The second you said Rocky, a name came to my head.
Yes.
That's fun.
So, so there's an Easter egg in there, which is
Uh,
the name of the owl. So the owl's Otis.
yeah.
Um, and we named him Otis because Otis, spelled differently and pronounced a little differently in Greek, means
Yeah.
owl.
Oh,
So
okay.
that's why we named him Otis.
Yeah. And then another follow-up question on this. Have you tried using this technology with your own teenagers?
Um, Actually, I'm very fortunate. My teens have my wife's genes,
Oh, okay.
and they are very early morning. So my
Okay.
oldest, who is now a sophomore in college, still gets up before 6 a.m.
Wow.
Um, yeah, I know. It's weird. Um,
Yeah.
and so he's actually his roommate in college. He met because they were the only two were they were two of the very few people who were at the dining hall at 7 a.m. when it
Oh,
opened.
yeah.
Because he's also an early morning person. So my kids all fortunate. My wife gets up very. She gets up at 5 a.m. So they have never had this kind of issue. They've all been quite good. My middle child, who's 16, um, she has a tendency to stay up until 10 or 11, but gets up at 6 a.m.
Okay.
Or if she sleeps in 7 a.m.
Yeah.
But still, that's pretty good. So yeah, I've not had to use this on them.
Yeah.
I wish I could say it's my excellent parenting. It's not. It's just
Yeah.
fortunate genes.
Yeah. So, another thing I want to talk about is kind of the link between sleep timing and like psychiatric symptoms. How even like when this can occur, even when like sleep duration is controlled for. So,
Yeah.
could you explain like some of this, like, and why it happens, maybe?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
again, there is definitely a link. Like if you're not getting enough sleep, there's psychiatric problems.
Right.
And it's mainly that when you're not getting enough sleep, your brain basically doesn't process information in the same way.
Yeah.
And things that wouldn't necessarily stress you out or make you anxious do.
Yeah.
Um, and so we've been very interested in kind of, well, what is the circadian role in this? Like we know that sleep has a role, but how about the circadian clock? And so we've looked at this in a few different ways, but most recently we did this kind of the population level and looked at something called the UK Biobank,
Okay.
which is a group of, well, there's a lot of data, but we ended up looking at 75,000 individuals
Wow.
who had their sleep tracked over a week and looked at psychiatric outcomes and basically showed that people who go to sleep late don't do well in terms of psychiatric outcomes. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything intrinsically bad about going to sleep at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think what happens, so there's a couple things that happen. One is that if you're going to sleep at 2 o'clock in the morning, these individuals often also have erratic sleep schedules.
Right. Yeah.
That can definitely lead to having greater incidence of psychiatric issues. Again, depression, anxiety,
Yeah.
mainly. People who also go to sleep late often also don't get enough sleep, again, leading to psychiatric issues. But once you even if you control for all of those, you still see that going to sleep late is a problem. And so what we think is going on is actually not ends up not being a circadian thing at all. What
Oh,
we think is happening is that when people are staying up late, it's at the end of their day, right? So they've had a day of accumulated stress a day
Yeah.
of accumulated anxiety. And when they're up late, there are often fewer social guardrails. They aren't around people, and they make decisions that they might not otherwise make. So we think that even under the best of circumstances, that's kind of what's happening. Now, and we say it like that because people who get up at 5 in the morning, they're also socially isolated. There aren't a lot of other people up at 5 in the
Right.
morning,
Yeah.
but it's at the beginning of their day. They just had a night of sleep.
Yeah.
And so we think they're more resilient to some of these psychiatric problems. On top of this, you can also see some colleagues of mine, uh, mainly at the University of Arizona, have come up with this thing called Mind After Midnight,
Okay.
which is basically that if you look at the average person, so you're not taking things apart, you're just looking at the person who is awake in the middle of the night, the brain doesn't work right. The prefrontal cortex isn't working right. You're basically you're being stressed and being made anxious about things at 2 o'clock in the morning. That 2 o'clock in the afternoon don't bother you at all.
Hmm.
And so they're undergoing a series of experiments trying to understand why. What
Yeah.
is it about being up? Now, again, I do think that being up at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's going to be like, it's going to be lack of sleep. It's going to be your circadian clock is telling you it's time to sleep. You're going to have a weaker circadian clock, and you're going to have all of these social things. But this is really um, one of the crucial things to understand about being up late is that, again, it's what you're doing. So, when we talk about sleep a lot, we often talk about like, oh, you're not getting enough sleep, right? Like you need 8 hours and you're only getting six. Okay, well, that's true. Six is probably for most people isn't enough. For some people it is. Most people it isn't. The question then is, what are you doing with those other 2 hours, right? You're not just sitting doing nothing. You're doing something. Now, does it matter then? So, does it matter for psychiatric outcomes, for example, if you're up until 2 in the morning and then you're only getting 6 hours of sleep? Does it matter if you're watching Netflix versus hanging out with family and friends? Does it matter if you're doing homework or you're out at a bar? Does it matter if, you are exercising or you're meditating? I think that what you're doing is super important. And again, it may not be doing the same as sleep, but it might offset some of it. So if you're
Right.
not getting enough sleep, but you're spending that extra time working, well, that's probably not great.
Right.
If
Yeah.
you're spending that extra time hanging out with friends, well, maybe then, the fact that you're with friends is increasing your overall mood and improving your psychiatric health.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not as good for your metabolic health, but maybe your psychiatric health is good. So anyway, it's something that we really don't know, and it's an
Yeah.
incredibly important thing to try to figure out.
Do you think that idea of kind of like what you're doing with extra sleep if you're sleeping less could explain why like some people like seem to get away with less sleep compared to other people?
I think also a lot of people um, can basically caffeinate away
Okay.
a
Yeah.
lot of that. And
Right.
and when you actually study people who don't get enough sleep or who say they don't need a lot of sleep, what you find kind of a couple of different phenotypes. First of all, there are a few people who actually do need very little sleep. Um, they're out there. It's genetic. Some colleagues of mine at UCSF have studied them.
Okay.
Louis Tachik is up there with Andy Crystal has studied these individuals. They're super interesting. They're also
Yeah.
very rare.
Yeah.
Most people who say, "Oh, I can get away with 6 hours of sleep," there's
Yeah.
a reason Starbucks is an incredibly profitable company. Um,
Yeah.
so you can caffeinate away that feeling. And in fact, when
Yeah.
you take a look at what is the impact of sleep loss?
Yeah.
The subjective feeling of sleepiness is by far the biggest effect of sleep loss.
Yeah.
Sleep loss also impacts things like cognition and athletic performance, but a really small amount. Again, it's not like if I got a good night's sleep, I'm going to be able to run, the 100 in under 10 seconds.
Yeah.
No matter how much sleep I
Yeah.
get, that's not happening, right? But if I'm an elite athlete, which I'm not, but if you take an elite athlete
Right.
and you get them to get a full night of sleep, could they improve their time by milliseconds?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Again, it's an incredibly small amount, but for them it matters.
Yeah.
When we studied this in swimmers, for example, you can see that we observe in swimmers that the in their reaction times, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the difference between well, we looked at the difference in the 100 freestyle. Now, the person who came in the Olympics first blew the field away, but the difference between second place and sixth place was less than the difference that we see due to having bad sleep.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that they had bad sleep, but I am saying is that it's a very small difference, and it's the difference between coming in second or sixth.
Yeah.
So it's a small effect, but an important effect. Um, uh, so uh, what were we talking about? Oh, I got off on that complete side.
So, I mean,
Tangent.
I guess we were kind of talking about like reaction times and sleep.
Um, yeah. So um, yes. So the point is that these are all kind of small effects.
Right.
People who are not sleeping enough. And then the biggest problem is though is that you can basically inure yourself to the effect of sleep deprivation. And so if you take people who are routinely sleep deprived,
Yeah.
um, they will report that they are not sleepy. And I believe them. I believe that truly they are not sleepy because they have basically learned how to ignore the biochemical signals that say, I'm tired.
Yeah.
Now, that's at a subjective level. If you test them, they act just as poorly as everyone else. So, for example, if you take a commercial airline pilot who flies, overnights, or
Yeah.
if you take a surgeon, right, or if you take a nurse, people who are routinely sleep deprived in their positions, you bring them into the laboratory, you mess with their sense of time, so they don't know what time it is. You sleep deprive them. They will say they're not tired, but when you test them, they perform just as poorly as everyone else. Which begs the question of, do you want your pilot or your surgeon to know how tired they are or not?
Right.
I'm not sure what the right answer is to that.
Yeah.
But point is that when people say, "Oh, I know I don't need I only get 5 hours of sleep and I'm fine." You know what? You might be fine subjectively, but objectively probably not.
Right.
And then the other question is that, well, you know, how effective are you when you're doing this? Because again, you're going to get diminishing returns at some point. And
Yeah.
this is true for work, it's true for students and studying. You know what I mean? Look, student undergraduates all the time come say, look, you know, how much should I study? Like when does sleep become more important than studying? And so my first question is, well, have you studied yet? And they're usually like, no. I'm like, well, then pull the all-nighter. That's
Yeah.
studying anything is better than sleep and knowing nothing. If
Right.
you're well rested and know nothing, that's not going to help.
Yeah.
So pull the all-nighter. But if you've been
Yeah.
studying over the course of the semester
Right.
and you think you got it down, that not getting enough sleep, first of all, you're not going to learn that much more.
Right.
Secondly, then you'll be tired during taking the test and
Yeah.
your recall's not going to be as good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of negatives to that. But honestly, it is one of the big deficits that we have in the field is that we don't know where the diminishing returns start for studying and where they start for sleep. So like I can tell you that if you only got 4 hours of sleep,
Yeah.
getting 5 hours of sleep is much better,
Okay.
right? But
Yeah.
if you get 7 hours of sleep, how much better is eight? I mean, it's
Well, it's a smaller
better.
percentage increase, I guess.
It
Like,
is.
yeah.
You think of like an S curve.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Where are you on that S curve? So then if you're studying, well, is that hour of sleep going to push you like from 99 to 99.5,
So I
or
guess
it's going to
like
go from 80 to 95?
are you kind of like saying that it's hard like quantitatively like figure out where like this is?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's important because again, when people are,
Right.
if I tell someone, look, you should get more sleep because you'll do better academically, then rightfully so, they say, prove it. And I can't yet. I can't
Yeah.
prove it. Again, there's lots of indirect data to show that people who get more sleep do better academically. But frankly, people who get more sleep are probably more serious academically. So,
Right.
there have been studies in college students saying college students who sleep more do better. But maybe that's because the college students who sleep more don't party as much. And the ones who party more aren't as serious students.
Right.
So that really doesn't tell me anything.
Yeah.
You really have to show me that, before, one semester when they were getting good sleep, they did better than another semester when they weren't getting good
Right.
sleep.
You'd have to like control it, I guess.
Right. But
Yeah.
even then, you say, well, maybe they weren't getting good sleep because they were studying so much because they had a huge course load. So it's a very complex
Right.
question that we really don't have a good answer to.
Yeah.
But I think it's very important because from a public health perspective, you know, I can say, you know what, you're 17 years old, you should really be sleeping, 9 hours every night. And then the person I'm speaking to basically has completely tuned me out because they're like, that's impossible. I have no interest in sleeping 9 hours every single night.
Yeah.
Okay. So that to me is stupid advice, right? You could say you should try to sleep 9 hours every night. Great, whatever. But again, that's not actually useful advice. Useful advice would be, what is the trade-off in terms of how many nights per week you sleep well?
Yeah.
So if I said, if you slept 9 hours a week, 9 hours a night for 3 out of 7 nights, you'd be at 80%. But if you did it 4 out of 7 nights, you'd be at 95%. You go, oh,
Yeah.
okay, I can try four instead of three. Um, but if it's, sleeping that extra sleep, but, you have to do it every night, or is it one night or 2 nights or every other night? What's the pattern? Again,
Right.
these are things that we really need to understand that we don't really have
Yeah.
a very good concept of right now. Again, in theory, we understand, but we really
Yeah.
don't have the data to prove what is useful. And from a public health perspective, again, once you tell people, well, you need to do this every night, they're like, okay, you
Yeah.
know, thank
Right.
you for the information. Moving on.
Yeah. Is this study is this like real research going on like regarding this, you think?
Um,
I guess it would
I'm
be like
not,
difficult to study like we like
yeah,
discussed.
I'm not
But...
aware of any. It would really have to be a very large study and lots of people.
Right.
Um, and there are some, there is some affiliated data collection that's going on
Okay.
that I'm aware of. Um, but hopefully that there will be more.
Yeah.
It has to be so. Um, to be honest, it would need a very clever design to
Yeah.
really be able to pick this up in a large group. And the hope is that um, as technology kind of evolves, that we're able to do this in remotely in individuals. And kind of what I mean by that is like we did a study a number of years ago that we published with Microsoft.
Okay.
And what we basically showed is that on when people use this Microsoft search engine, Bing, um, that the typing speed when they typed in their searches for common searches was highly indicative of how much sleep they got.
Oh, that's
So
clever.
we could actually remotely monitor thousands of individuals
Yeah.
um, and see how much sleep they were getting.
Yeah.
And then a colleague of mine took a look and actually took the typing speeds of different counties and basically showed that that typing speed, which again was related to how much sleep they were getting, was directly correlated with car accidents. So basically, the
Wow.
idea is sleepier counties had more car accidents.
Yeah.
Now, again, it was cute, but a lot of caveats in there. But the point is that
Yeah.
I think that as kind of technology evolves like this, that we'll have more and more
Right.
ability to basically look at large groups of individuals. Because frankly, if I wanted to monitor your sleep, um, you can do it. It's expensive, it's difficult,
Yeah.
it's invasive, but the less invasive it is, the more data you can collect.
Yeah.
And so if we were able to collect, on, people, like if we were able to, convince Google to do this and collect data on millions of people, and then take a look and say, okay, now that we're looking at millions of people and we can look at sleep patterns of millions of people, can we then associate this with academic outcomes? And so, for example, a colleague of mine who is in Singapore, he was able to infer sleep patterns by looking to see when the students in college there were online. Because
Uh,
basically, as soon as they wake up, they're
right.
online.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're online all day, and then they go
That's
to
like a
sleep.
fundamental thing that like allows them to, I guess,
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
so basically, you just track when are they offline, and that lines up
That's
pretty
clever.
well. It's
Yeah.
not perfect, but it lines up
Right.
pretty well with their sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's a college or it's a university, and you can
Yeah.
track academic performance.
Yeah.
So then you could take a look. Here's their sleep patterns. Here's their academic performance. where, how does it matter? Now, again, lots of problems, lots of caveats,
Yeah.
but I think that we're moving into a phase where we can start addressing these problems at scale and
Yeah.
really get answers of how people kind of respond to sleep and performance.
Yeah. So, on that note, thank you so much, Dr. Zeitzer, for sharing your insights today. It's been a pleasure having you and talking with you today. I think I've heard more interesting research ideas than I ever have in a short period of time. And it was great conversation for me.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure speaking with you.